Um, Hi everyone, my name is Cameron,
And I'm Nisha.
and in Gamescrafters we were solving Nine Men's Morris. What is Nine Men's Morris? Nine Men's Morris is an ancient game dating back to about 2,000 years ago. It's played on a board like this, which has 24 holes, which are connected by these lines here. One player plays with the black pieces and one player plays with the white pieces. Each player has 9 stones each to place on the board. So firstly, we have to understand what a mill is. A mill is a row of 3 stones of the same color. For example, over here, white has a mill because these white stones are in a row of 3, and so does black over here. Anytime a player forms a mill by placing or moving a stone to form one, then they can remove one of the opponent's stones off of the board. The game has 3 phases. So we start off with the empty board here, and each player has 9 stones to place. So in phase 1, each player takes turns placing a stone of their color on the board. So if this was phase 1 and it was black's turn, then black can place one of their stones on any empty space on this board. Uh, so once each player has placed all of their stones, then we move on to stage 2, where players are limited to moving their stones only to adjacent locations. So for example, if it was white's turn and it was stage 2, then this white stone can only move to an adjacent location, and the only place is there. Um, anytime a player forms a mill, then they can remove one of their opponent's stones off of the board. Uh, and this stage 2 continues until one player is left with only 3 stones remaining, uh, where we are at stage 3. So if one player has 3 stones only remaining, then that player can now move any of their stones to any place in the board. This is called like the flying stage. And the game finally ends when one player is left with only 2 stones, or if they don't have any legal moves. So that is how to play Nine Men's Wars. Um, as you can imagine, with 24 slots on the board, there are many different positions that you can reach in the game. There are hundreds of billions of these positions that could be reached. So you have to consider the different numbers of stones that could be on the board, or different arrangements of stones on the board. And you also have to consider whose turn it is. So the turn and the arrangement of the stones on the board uniquely determine a position. Um, so how do we approach these larger games? We use this idea of tiers. Tiers are groups of positions that have something in common, and tiers can be defined in many ways, but here are some examples to show how you define tiers. So we're going to use 2 examples, which are chess and Nine Men's Morris. Uh, Many games can have tiers defined as what pieces are on the board. So for example, in chess, you can have a tier defined by having this exact set of pieces: 1 white king, 1 white knight, 1 black king, and 3 black pawns. And in this tier are all the positions resulting from uh, all the ways you can rearrange those pieces on the board. Similarly, in Nine Men's Morris, you can have a tier defined as 4 black stones and 4 white stones. And in that tier are all the positions resulting from the ways you can rearrange these stones on the board. You can transition between tiers if there is a change in the set of pieces that are on the board. So in chess, if you capture or promote, then you have a new set of pieces and the board position is in a different tier. And in Nine Men's Morris, if you form a mill and take an opponent's piece, then you have a different number of stones and the new position is in a different tier. So in chess, you can never have the same set of pieces after you capture or promote. And in Nine Men's Morris, once your stone is removed, you cannot regain a stone. So tiers are sort of characterized by this irreversibility. And once you make a move, you can still remain in the same tier. So if you just move your pieces around without capturing or forming a mill, then you're in the same tier. We can use this idea of tiers for an organized way of solving the game. Here's an example of a tier transition diagram for Nine-Men's Morris. At the very top is 4-4, which means that there are 4 black stones and 4 white stones. So this is the tier involving all the positions where you can have 4 black stones and 4 white stones on the board, all the different ways you can arrange those stones. After a stone is taken away from a 4-4 position, then the game can transition to either the tier 3 white and 4 black, or 4 white and 3 black. And the game can continue as such as shown by the diagram. We start solving by starting at the very bottom tiers. So first we solve tiers that involve one player having only 2 stones, because those tiers only have primitive positions. And once we have solved those, we can solve parent tiers. So for example, we can only solve the tier 3-3 once we have solved the children tiers 2-3 and 3-2. And we solve this all the way up to the topmost tier, which is the very start of the game. Yeah. Still, a tier can be extremely large. So if you consider an example tier where there's 8 black stones and 8 white stones on the board, and no stones left to place, then there are 18.9 billion different positions that can be in this tier. And considering like summing over all of those tiers, that gives you your hundreds of billions of tiers. So there's still a lot of room for optimization here. If we run this, it can take, or if we run a solver on this, then it can take days to solve, and it can run into memory issues as well. So the solver can crash.
So our goal was to improve the efficiency of this solver so we could finally fully solve the game. So specifically what we did was we expanded symmetries to speed up the solver, and we implemented methods to generate parents of children moves, i.e. undo moves, to decrease the amount of space required in storage. So let's first talk about symmetries. So what are symmetries? They're positions in a game that have equivalent values. So let's take tic-tac-toe, for example. This game has 8 symmetries, i.e. if you take one position, you can manipulate that position to get 7 other positions that are exactly equal. And why is this so useful? This is incredibly useful in speeding up the actual time of solving, because if we solve one position, we've already solved for all the 7 other symmetries. So in the case of tic-tac-toe, using symmetries would cut the time down by a factor of 8. So let's look at a visual example. Suppose we have this example on the left, which you have X in the top left and bottom middle and O in the middle. One of the symmetries that you could have is like this. So what's happened here, we flipped the board over the x-axis. And it's just a permutation of the board, but you can see, like, in common sense, even if you flip the board around, the game doesn't change. However, in our program, these would be counted as 2 separate positions. And you could also take a y-axis reflection of this original position. Again, we just flip the board around. If you imagine playing in real life, that doesn't change anything. So now let's consider the symmetries of Nine-Men's Morris in specific. So Nine-Men's Morris is unique for its large amount of symmetries. It has 32 symmetries, which is 4 times what tic-tac-toe had. In tic-tac-toe, you could reflect over the x-axis and y-axis. And here we have even more axes. If you look at this figure on the right, you'll see that we have the x-axis and y-axis, but we also have the lines y equals x, y equals negative x, and this in and out thing, which I think is the coolest because it's very uncommon in other games. So let's take a look at this black image. So this is how a position would look if you were playing the game in your terminal. You would have a standard position and the spots are labeled 0 through 23 in the standard ordering. In this position, we have an equal number of X's and O's in these spots. So here's one symmetry, the X-axis flip. So as you can see, if I toggle back and forth, everything below the X-axis is flipped up in this image, in this actual position, and in the positioning of, numbering of positions. And let's look at the Y-axis flip. Again, in the normal one, we had 0, 1, 2, but now we have 2, 1, 0. And we've flipped over all of these X's and O pieces. Lastly, the in and out. You can see we had 0, 1, 2 in the outer ring, but now it's in the inner ring. We basically brought the entire outer ring into the inner ring and the inner ring to the outer ring. So these are not all of the symmetries, but this is just an example so you can get an idea of how we can permute the board, but still get the exact same value of the position in the end. And this amount of symmetries is extremely useful for us. So like as Cameron mentioned, we have an enormous amount of positions. And if we're able to decrease the number of positions we have to consider by a factor of 32, that will be an incredible time save. Next, let's consider the undoing moves methods that I mentioned. So as Cameron mentioned, the standard solver stores all of the parents of a position because we need to work from the bottom to the top, from the primitive positions to the starting of the game. But this requires an enormous amount of space since there's an enormous amount of positions, and for each position, you would need to store a pointer to their parents. And this, we were hypothesizing that this is one of the causes of the solver crashing in the middle of solving the game. So instead, what we did is we created functions to generate parents from a child position. It does increase the time it takes to solve, but it decreases the storage by a ton because we don't have to store the pointers. We can just generate them when we need them. Okay. So the method we implemented to be used by the solver is called generate undo moves. And what it takes is a position. For example, we have this position below and a tier for the parents to be in. So let's look at this position below. We have 4 X's and 4 O's. So let's interpret this tier, which is 10, 44. The 10 means that there are 10 pieces left to place because there's 5 X pieces that haven't been placed and 5 O pieces that haven't been placed. And there's 4 X pieces on the board and 4 O pieces on the board. Also,
Sorry, I think. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Would they be confused about X and O though? Because
I'll just mention that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're right. You're right. Okay. And I also forgot my first part of my spiel. Okay. So the method we wrote was generate undo moves, and what it takes in is a position and a tier. Now suppose you have some random position. You could think of many parents that position could have come from in a lot of different tiers. So here we're restricting ourselves to one parent tier. Let's look at this position that we got past it. This has 4 X's and 4 O's, and it is in stage 1, which means that the players are still placing their pieces down. By the way, there's not a clear way to represent black and white in the terminal, so we are using X for black and O for white, or the other way around, doesn't really matter. So we're in stage 1, and there are 4 X's and 4 O's. This means that X has 5 pieces left to place and O has 5 pieces left to place. So in total, there are 10 pieces left to place, 4 X's and 4 O's, and that's where our tier 1044 comes from. Now, the parent tier that we were passed in this case, is 1143, and that it's O's turn in the parent tier. We can see that this means that in the previous tier, there was one more piece left to place, and that there was one less O piece on the board, and no change to X pieces. So what this means is that the moves they want us to generate are those where O placed a piece on the board but did not take away any of X's moves. When O places a piece, it reduces the amount of pieces left by one and increases the amount of O pieces on the board by one without changing X's pieces. So let's look at these undo moves. The first thing is O could have placed the piece in this position where there's currently an O. And we can repeat that for all of them. So here, sorry, I'm circling the wrong thing. O could have been placed here. And in this case, O could have been placed here. And lastly, this position. So you can see that our undo moves are basically the positions that would have happened before O had made their move and placed their O piece down in one of the places. Thank you for listening. That's what we did to improve the efficiency of Nine Men's Morris, and there's still a lot more that we're actually planning to work on. So yeah, thank you.